a love story. Pratyaksha Charita Sambhoga. The most famous natakas or romances are Mudra Rakshas, Veni Sang. The most famous natakas are full of romance, but some are not, like Mudra Rakshas, Veni Samhar. They are called natakas, but I have my serious doubts if they can be called natakas, because according to Natyashastra Lakshanas, they cannot be defined, but for some reason they have been categorized. Abhinav has noted that in spite of the injunctions of the Natyashastra that natak and prakaran have to be produced in Kaishiki Vritti, Mudra Rakshas, Kritya Ravan and Veni Sambhar are devoid of Kaishiki. So categorizing these plays as natakas, even though they do not qualify to be natakas, is as old as Abhinav Gupta at least. This distortion had occurred very early. Actually, to call these three plays natakas is a mistake. They should be rather categorized as vyayogas in multiple acts. Because a vyayog is supposed to be a one-act affair, these plays were fitted into the natak category, overlooking their themes which are not erotic but martial. They are full of fights. And there is no hero and heroine who have fallen in love in Mudra Rakshas. Mudra Rakshas, is the famous play on how Chanakya, Vishnugupta Chanakya, succeeded in quelling the rebellion against Chandragupta Maurya, winning over the former minister Mudra Rakshas and installing the king as the Chakravarti. So there's nothing erotic. The classical examples of natak are Swapnavasav Dattam, Abhigyana Shakuntalam, Uttar Ramcharit and Malvikagni Mitram. So these are some of the well-known natakas. This is what a natak is. A prakaran was structured just like a natak, except that it had a set of characters of lower social status. The natak is largely centered around the royal family. The genres in India, like the Greek genres, were hierarchy based, because this whole society was hierarchy based. So, natakas are more about the royal kingdom. Also, the story, the vastu, the protagonist need not have been from the cultural memory bank, but may be imagined. Autapattikam. Examples of prakaran are Mrichakatikam, Pushpadutika. Here the protagonist was either a Brahmin, a merchant, a minister or a big trader. So in Mrichakatikam, the hero is a merchant. Although he is Brahmin by jati, by birth, but maybe sometime his ancestors must have fallen from the role of Rigvedic or Vedic instruction, and they went into business. So he continues to be a businessman, but he is a person of very high character. Minor characters were servants, pimps, small traders, courtesans and servant women. The episode centered around a household, as no travel to other worlds or other region of India was shown. So in a prakaran, you would not show unusual things, like somebody going to Devalok or Munis coming and descending from heaven. Normally, the mixing of courtesans and women of household was not shown. If perchance an episode is depicted on such an occasion, it was recommended that the conversation be in Sanskrit. The mixed genres such as natak and prakaran, a mixed genre which drew upon natak and prakaran, though not counted as one of the 10 genres, is natika. It was supposed to be the king tale of a king irresistible and wayward infatuation with some young girl from a royal retinue or a musical trainee under royal patronage. It was supposed to be replete with song and dance and to contain the usual scenes of courtship, tiffs, jealousies, quarrels, and reunion. Ratnavali is the best known example. So these are some of the examples from classical texts of the different kinds of genres. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Regarding tragedy, yesterday I was about to ask you, as the Indian way of looking into the literature or drama, we say that there is no tragedy.
In Indian.
Yeah, in Indian. For which two stories that come to my mind. That is Ravana being a good human being or Asura. In Ramayana, when Rama and Ravana fight is there, the Ravana, in spite of being a Rama Bhakta, see, a person who watches Ramayana, he was about to experience the tragedy. Immediately they say Ramabana was came, he got mukti. No tragedy. Ravana got mukti. He didn't end up in tragedy, so we don't call him as a tragedy hero. Number one. Another story is that comes to my mind is Kuchan to Swarga. One fellow tries to enter into Swarga, and then the door was closed, he was about to fall, I am ready to experience the tragedy. Immediately they created Swarga and say, a separate Swarga has been created. So like that in Mahabharata also, Ashwatthama, Duryodhana and Karna also are not called as tragic hero. Why the tragedy concept is not in the Indian drama? Because you are a great psychology professor, you have to throw light on it. Because is there any psychological idea towards experiencing arts?
All right, now let me ask you a question. If Ravan would not have gone to moksha, where could he have gone? If Ravan had not been given moksha, in Valmiki Ramayana we know that he is just killed. And yes, there are inferences which could just indicate that maybe he had moksha. But by the time the Vaishnavas wrote different kinds of Ramayanas, Adhyatma Ramayana and Tulsikrit Ramayana and the Ramayana, Kamban and all that, the idea of moksha of Ravana or of moksha of Kansa and all this has come in. Now in the Indian system, look, where could he have gone? He could have gone to Narak, Raurava Narak, which is the lowest level of hell. He could have gone there for some time. What would happen then? After a while he'll come back. Because in the Hindu Narak you cannot stay for always. If Kans had been sent to Narak, he would have again come back. There was no need for Ravan to go to heaven. If you don't want Ravan to come back, there is only one way, which is to give him moksha. Another factor. If something comes close to fire, no matter what that thing is, it becomes fire. I'm talking of real high temperature fire. Whether it is wood or iron or whatever, at that high temperature it would just be. So Rama is like fire. He is Brahma. somebody who has come so close to him as Ravana through dvesh, through hatred, will eventually be mukta. So in this scheme of thought, in the Vaishnava scheme of thought, the only possible gati is mukti, and because Ravan has done a bhakti, he has hated God, when he hated all others, he was victorious. But when he hated Brahma, because Ram is a Brahma, so he comes to moksha. Now your other question, why is there no tragedy? In the Greek scheme, when the hero gets killed, where does he go? According to the Greek scheme, there was a sort of a hell in which people lived, but there were different kinds of hell. You know, there were the asphodel fields in which the ordinary people lived. They were half starved, and whenever somebody did a shraddha for them, their children in the world, then they partook of the shraddha and they lived. Then the learned like Aristotle and Socrates, they went to the asphodel fields, to the Elysian fields, and they lived there in great peace and wonder, and there was all the time light, and they discussed philosophy. And so it was some kind of a heavenly state. It's only in the Christian scheme that there is an eternal hell. So you can say that Macbeth went to eternal hell because he had done something morally so wrong and terrible. But in the Greek scheme or in the Indian scheme, which you may even call the Indo-European scheme, there is no concept of eternal damnation. Now, the most revealing part of things. Even in the Greek world, the hero dies, but he is the hero of the first tragedy. There were 3 tragic plays performed. So, in the first one, the hero dies. In the second one, there is a conflict. And in the third tragedy, which was produced in that one day, and the total of which was called tragedy, trilogy, in that last part of the trilogy, there is a perfect reconciliation and peace. So, actually, the original Greek tragedy was not an unhappy ending sequence of plays. It was a very peaceful, harmonious, beautiful ending. It is only when the Europeans revived the system of tragedy in 16th century that they wrote a single play in which there was damnation, death, because of the Christian scheme of thought. So, real Greek tragedy was not an happy ending. Now, how does it relate to us? We are creating genres on the basis of bhavas. Not whether the hero dies or the hero lives. Is it a play of Karuna Rasa? Is it a play of Shringara Rasa? Is it a play of Bibhatsa? Is it a play of Raudra? So, Natak will be Shringara. Natak will be Shringara. Prakarana will be Shringara. Of course, it would depict the Shringar of a lower level social character, but it would be Shringar. Vyayog, about which I'll read now, the other Dasharupakas, would be conflict between a Manav and a Rakshas or a person from another loka or another character, yoni, right? Then it is bibhats or whatever emotion they want to depict. And the end of that again would be either the person dies or the person lives or there is reconciliation. The fact that the hero dies or lives at the end makes no difference, because in the Indian scheme of things, whether you die today or you die tomorrow, you will be reborn. The only way not to be reborn is to have moksha. So you cannot judge unhappiness by death. That's the point I am making. This is the philosophic basis. But don't come around and say that Greek tragedy was unhappy ending. Greek tragedy was happy ending. Only the first part of Greek tragedy was unhappy ending, and the Europeans wrote only the first part. We have all been told like this, but this is a European approach, and the Europeans refuse to acknowledge the fact, even though they know it very well, that Greek tragedy was unhappy ending. This book of mine was published in 1994. And since 1995, I have been attending every second year the most exclusive conference of Greek scholars on drama, which is held in Delphi. I have attended it 7-8 times, where the best of the scholars from Cambridge and Oxford, they have all known the ideas, some of them have read this book. Not one has contradicted what I have told you today or published an article contradicting. But they simply will not acknowledge, because Europe produced an unhappy ending tragedy, so they would like the whole world to believe that Greek tragedy was also unhappy ending. But facts are different. The Greeks produced a trilogy, and tragedy for the Greek did not mean an unhappy ending play. This is common. There is no dispute about this fact among the scholars of Greek drama. It's very well known. But to come to the Indian 10 plays, one has to see that happiness and unhappiness is part of the sukh and dukh cycle. And hence this dukh and sukh cycle would constantly be there. And it will be constantly repeated. Because play, natak, is sukh and dukh. Natya is nothing else except sukh and dukh. Whether you live or you die, if you continue to live and experience a lot of dukkha, one can write a play on it, like some of the plays we'll just talk about, which are full of unhappiness. So let us go to some of them. The Samabakar was supposed to be a play only on extraterrestrial personages like gods, Deva and Asura. So there were no human characters. It was always Deva Asura Sangram. The story could only be a well-known one, told in 3 acts. They could not be 7 acts or 8 acts or 10 acts. The Samavakar would be short because there is a lot of action, lot of fighting. It was constructed out of episodes showing upheavals and reversals, each of the 3 kinds: war on flood, whirlwind, elephant attack, taking siege. There were 3 types of upheavals: intrigue, godly wrath, and change of fortune were the 3 kapatas, that is, reverses, which happened and which were depicted in these plays. 3 kinds of man-woman relationship could also be shown: for dharma, for well-being, or for love. It seems that this genre was basically meant for depicting war, and war for women, they were part of the story. There could be as many as 12 protagonists. So this goes on to describe the Samavakaras. Amrit Manthan was produced as a Samavakar by Bharat Muni. The playtime for a Samavakar was supposed to be 18 nadi. 1 nadi is 24 minutes. So 24 into 7 would mean 7.2 hours. 24 minutes into 18, 7.2 hours. The first act was of 13 nadis duration and the second of 6. So this was a big action play which lasted for 7 hours, not for 7 days, like a nataka. The genre Iha Mrig had a limited theme. It had characters which could only be extraterrestrial, divya, devatas, yaksha, kinnara, gandharva. So a play on yaksha, gandharva, kinnara, etc. was called Iha Mrig, telling their stories. We do not have any example of Iha Mrig from ancient times, but the 13th century author Vatsaraj, he has given an example. But that can hardly be called an Iha Mrig. Dim like the Samavakar was a grand action genre with a well-known story and a hero. The 6 sentiments of Veer, Raudra, etc. were used here. The example of Dim is Tripuradaha, Shankara killing the Danavas and destroying the 3 cities of the Rakshasas. The Natyashastra mentioned that Bharat Muni performed a Dim for Shiva, which was also called Tripuradaha. The 6th genre was called Vyayog. It took up a famous story. It had few women characters. Events depicted were supposed to be for 1 day. The play was a small 1-act affair. Here there were no extra terrestrial characters but only humans. It was meant to show battles of smaller warlords. Bhasa's Madhyama Vyayog is the best known example. Now, there was another art form which was popular and which is all full of Karuna Rasa. It was called Utsishtakanka. It had human characters. The main feature was weeping women, unconsolable women, widows rolling on the ground after they had lost their husbands and sons in great wars. This natak was supposed, this Rupak was supposed to have only Bharati Vritti, and the theme was always the misery that women and children suffered as a consequence of war. So this Utsrishtakank or Anka was a genre only meant for the wailing of women and children, right? So this is a clear example that ancient plays could be tragic in the common sense of the word. All right? Because it began in a happiness, it ended in unhappiness. It was nothing but unhappiness. The most well-known example is Urubhangam by Bhasa. In all other genres from Samavakar onwards, the lokal had to be Bharatvarsha. They did not show plays as if they are where the scenery is somewhere in Yavana Pradesh or China. Remember, in ancient India, they knew about countries outside India, but the play would not be set, let us say, in China or in Turkey or in somewhere in Greece, they would not make a setting because they wanted to depict things happening in Bharata Bhumi only. Now then there were three kinds of plays which were devoted entirely to humor: Prahasana, Bhan and Vithi. There was not much Kaishiki Vritti. The sophisticated Prahasan used characters like low-degree ascetics, mendicants, Brahmins, etc. And there was a lot of humor in it. The primary purpose of Prahasana was to target lazy and greedy gurus, teachers, lazy and non-working disciples, then all the mathadhishas who were looting people, all the kind of deceitful mendicants, swamis, ascetics, etc. Pretentious scholars who were not really scholars, were pretending to be scholars. So Prahasan was entirely dedicated to make fun of such people. And such people, would be mostly Brahmins. So this was a play, this was a genre reserved for making fun of those who were considered to be the intellectual and spiritual class of Indian society, right? Some of the famous names are Matta Vilas, Latak Melak, Bhagavad Ajjukiyam, and so many of them. Now then there was another form in which you depicted the business people. You see, the kings got depicted in Natakas. The sophisticated, well-to-do Baniyas, Vaishyas got depicted in Prahasanas. The professors and teachers, etc., they got depicted in Prahasanas. Now, what about the newly rich people? Those who had plenty of money in society and who didn't know how to use it. For them, there was a whole genre called Bhana. Of the 10 Rupakas, the Bhan was a unique form. Here the Bhan dressed up as a pimp. As a pimp. A pimp, is the go-getter or the agent for the courtesan, one who gets customers. And enacted out a series of episodes. He pretended to walk around a town visiting its pleasure houses. describing the people, the events and episodes and things that he saw. So basically, the genre of Bhan was about courtesans and their customers. The genre was reserved for depiction of unrestrained prodigals. All the rich young men who go to crash parties today and in ancient India went to the courtesan houses. They are courtesans, gamblers, parasites and cronies. The Bhan was enacted with a conversation and dialogue. It was enacted by one person only. So it was an Ekahariya form. One actor enacted the pimp, the courtesan, the customer and everything. The dialogues were very brief and only to make the Bhan speak more. And he said all kinds of things. Most of it was not very elegant. Most of it was not very sophisticated. It was crude humor. For instance, here is the translation, a brief translation from one of the dialogues. The Bhan says, "Dear audience, let me tell you something. My wife is no better than a blind person. At the time of love making, she makes a pitiable face. She hardly utters a word. She is overclad with modesty. She is stupid and she never comes to me. She is like a roped animal." So it's making fun of his wife whom he can give up and go to the courtesan. All talk was accompanied by Angik Abhinay, but the gestures were not in Kaishiki Vritti. The Kaishiki Vritti, as you can see, is reserved for a very sophisticated, soft purpose. What is the meaning of Kaishiki Vritti? Yeah.
Does Bana had a script or they improvised in the place?
No, they were scripted by the playwrights and they were produced. But I'm sure there was lots of improvisation, as there was improvisation in all other art forms.
Do you have the form still existing in some parts of India?
You mean, do we have the surviving, any survival? No, there is no really form. There is a form called Bhand in Rajasthan, where a single actor tells stories and says things. He has no connection with the ancient Bhan. Only the fact is that he is a single actor. And he puts on various kinds of roles. You know, he becomes a trickster. Someday he will become a policeman and come to your home and surprise you by saying, "Here is a warrant of arrest." And then you get very scared. You say, "Where do I have to go?" And then everybody has a laugh and takes little money. This is what is the present day Bhana.
In Kerala also we have a form called Ullal.
Hmm.
That is also by one man.
Yeah.
I was little searching whether it is connected with Bana or something.
Yes, it is,
As you said, it is not connected with its story.
except that it is.
It has humor, but Bana has some other quality which doesn't suit with Ullal.
Yeah, I mean, what he means is that in terms of the themes, the stories, etc., it has no connection. The only connection it has is that it's a single actor and it is humor. Now, obviously, there can be no possibility of this art form continuing because this was dependent upon a social reality of the institution of the courtesan in Indian society. So when the institution of the courtesan disappeared, then this art form would also disappear, because where does Bhana come from? And Bhana's typical character is the pimp, right? So that is the reason. When the thing to be depicted disappeared, then the art form disappears. Well, thank you very much for this morning session. Come back at 1:30.